Okay, welcome to the lecture on knowing and knowledge. And you're going to see in this week, you're going to see all kinds of things about semantic memory. And right now, I'll just ask you, do a little bit of a thought experiment and try to think about what is the difference between knowledge and memories. Something we're going to talk about a whole lot during the work on knowing and knowledge is semantic memory. The memory of things that you know, but you don't know how you know them. If I ask you to think of everything you can possibly think of when you think of the color yellow, you might think of all kinds of things. You can actually pause this if you want and do this right now. Just write down everything that you can think of with yellow. Okay, pause it right now. I'm going to keep talking about it. So if you did do that little exercise right now, you might find that you have no idea how that some of these ideas relate to each other. I'll read you this sentence and think about all the things that come to mind. Kind of visualize this sentence as you read it or as I read it to you. When Lisa was on her way home from the store with the balloon, she fell and the balloon floated away. So you probably have ideas in your head about that. Maybe you think that she just bought the balloon at the store. Neither of those things are stated in this sentence, but you probably think that Lisa's a young girl and that she just bought the balloon at the store. Probably that this is a helium balloon, that she tripped and fell probably on concrete. The balloon was probably red and it probably floated away because she wasn't holding on to it well enough. And when she tripped, it kind of like got loosened in her hand and then she floated away, and maybe she started crying because she's probably 5 or 6 years old, right? Yeah, so what if I show you this picture? And you're kind of like, what, right? Why didn't you say she was 30? Why didn't you say she's tripped on a banana peel? Something like that. And what if the balloon wasn't a helium balloon? It was like the kind of balloon people float around in or something. So this all has all of these associations and all of these inferences that you took from the sentence. All of those are semantic memory. All of these assumptions, unsaid assumptions that you would come to just based on this sentence, that's all because of your semantic memory. It makes everything such a rich experience because you can take so much more out of what I'm saying. And because we all have those semantic memories. We would all think that Lisa was a young girl, probably that the balloon's red. All of these things that I stated, we would all think those things. So if I was going to make this sentence and I was going to violate some of those assumptions that we should all come to, then I should mention them too. So this is kind of a group semantic memory store that we could go that far and say that. But we're going to get into things like that a little bit more when we get into language. But for now, just know that all of those other associations you made were based on your own semantic memory. So we can call semantic memory encyclopedia memory. It's our permanent store of world knowledge that we can draw upon. And that is activated all the time when we have all these ideas. And like I said, memory and knowledge have so much to do with each other. Everything that we know is a memory in some way or another. And so now we're going to get into Elizabeth Loftus, who is just a really big heavy hitter when it comes to memory. And I really hope that for the rest of your life you remember Elizabeth Loftus, because she is an amazing scientist and she did so much of this memory research. Really awesome stuff too. So I'm going to link one of her videos this week, and so you can find out more about her from her own portrayal of her work. But she made a really important message in 1980 that maybe we never even stored the information, and maybe that's why we don't remember some things, because you can have a retrieval failure, but you can also have an encoding failure way before it's time to retrieve the information. So you have to make sure that it's encoded if you want to remember it at all. So long before 1980, in 1974, Loftus and Palmer did this study where they showed people an experiment of a car accident. After the car accident, they said, how fast was that white car going when it smashed into the SUV? When it smashed into the SUV, how fast was it going? Okay, and they took people in another condition. They said, a whole different group of people, they said, how fast was that car going when it bumped that SUV? This isn't the actual video. I'm just using this video for demonstration. Another group, they said, how fast was it going when it collided? Okay, so like I said, that's not the actual video, but it was something like that. So they used these different words. These are some example words that they might have used. 1974, Loftus and Palmer. If they said contacted, the participants reported that the car was going 32 miles an hour. Hit, it's a little stronger of a word, right? 34 miles an hour. And then as you go on, the stronger of a word they use, the faster the people remembered the cars having hit each other. So of course it's a memory experiment. They asked people the question after they saw the car accident. And the people reported it going faster if they used a harsher word. Okay, then 2 weeks later, this should be a 2, not 1. It's no good when your figures are wrong, right? So 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, they asked the people, did you see any broken glass? And depending on the word they used, the people either remembered or were more likely to remember there having been broken glass. And there wasn't any broken glass, but people remembered that there was, depending on the word that they used. They said hit, less people were likely to have remembered broken glass. So that relates to something that we're going to come back to over and over and over again in this class, and hopefully you can see it as a recurring theme already. But this top-down processing is the information that you hold in your schemas and your scripts and your semantic knowledge are going to influence your perception. They're going to influence how fast you think something was going. They're going to influence how fast you remember something is going. They're going to influence everything. And this is all has to do with top-down processing. The actual recall is influenced by the context of the question. Okay? So all of this is top-down processing, and I hope that you can think of ways that this has to do with top-down processing. So another thing that Loftus did was this other experiment. She actually got people to remember spilling punch at their Aunt Sally's wedding. So hopefully one of the things that comes to your mind too, in realizing all of this work that Loftus did, eyewitness testimony. Like right here, this guy on the left, Ron Cotton, spent 11 years in prison for raping someone. And this was the actual rapist. And they don't even really look that much alike. But she was really sure that this was the guy who had raped her. And he was in prison for 11 years. But eventually he was freed. And they're actually friends now. One of my students told me about a special he had seen on TV about this story. So if any of you guys can find a link to that, that'd be cool. But so this is just one of thousands of examples of somebody being locked up for a false eyewitness testimony. And Loftus's work was revolutionary because she was one of the first people to say, hey, you can't trust your eyes. Like I saw it with my own eyes doesn't mean very much. And actually because of this case right here, eyewitness testimony is not admissible as the sole thing to lock someone up. But it's the jurors are still going to be heavily influenced by it. So if you're ever on a jury and somebody has an eyewitness testimony, just know that doesn't actually mean very much. So make sure you know that. Another thing that Loftus did, back to the other thing. Can you think of another real life way that her work matters? And especially like in the early 80s and 90s, it was a really big deal. Anybody rack your brain, pause it if you want to give yourself a couple minutes to think about it. But I'll tell you, it's hypnosis and retrieved memories. Because, right, a lot of what Loftus is doing, like I talked about in the previous slide, is just planting these memories in people. And so people could go to a therapist and say, I've got OCD and I'm really hyperactive and I don't know what to do with myself. I'm depressed all the time and I really don't like the winter. And the psychologist can say, oh, well, I've seen all of those, symptoms before. Why don't you pay me $500 an hour for the next 10 years and we'll get to the bottom of it. You know, like just by suggesting these things happen to a person, the person might actually remember them having happened even though they haven't. So a lot of people could be taken advantage of that way if they believed it, if they weren't familiar with Loftus's work. So another thing that she did was this experiment with this stop sign car accident. She showed them a video and there was a car accident and a stop sign, and then right after, a few minutes after they saw the video, they asked them, how fast was it going when it hit the yield sign? How fast was that car going? But there wasn't a yield sign. Remember, the video is at the stop sign. But just because of the misleading question, later on when they were asked about it, they would remember having seen a yield sign, even though it was a stop sign for everyone. He wanted to study memory for meaningful material. He basically would have people recall something several times, and by comparing their recollection over and over again, maybe 2 weeks later, maybe 2 months later, maybe, you know, over these periods, he would see what kind of changes people had in their memory. This is the passage. It was 1932, and again, this is a depiction of parts of the passage and then somebody's recall of it. Here's another and I'm going quickly because I'm running out of time for the YouTube limitations, but you can pause it on all of these if you want to read them. Then here's 2 recalls. 15 minutes after hearing the story and 4 months later. And all this has to do with schemas and scripts, and schemas and inferences that we make in our memory, just like how the schemas in our semantic memory will interfere with our conceptualization of Lisa falling with her red balloon. There's also these things interplaying in Bartlett's, what we call the reproduction experiments, because what they were doing was reproducing the story of the War of the Ghosts over and over again. So this is classic research on inferences. It's very old school, 1932. As far as psychology goes, it's pretty old research. So he found that participants tended to take out material that didn't make sense from their own viewpoint. So, like at the end of the story, some black stuff comes out of somebody's mouth, and people would modify that to agree with their own viewpoint. So they'd take things out of the story. They would also shape the story into a more familiar framework, because it's easier to remember things if they fit into our schemas better, right? Like, because then we have a place in our memory to put it. He also found that they would add extra material to the story and make inferences so that the story made more sense from their perspective. We think of memory, we think of forgetting things, but it's not very often that we think of remembering things that weren't there. But that's actually, you can see from Bartlett's work and from Loftus's work, right, that there's all kinds of memories that never happened. So it's kind of crazy stuff, right? Am I blowing your mind? Right? It's crazy. So, like, one of the really famous things from this that I always think of is how it's a story about Native American Indians, and they always would say they got shot with an arrow, but that's not in the story. Nowhere in the story does it say if they were using guns or bows and arrows or anything like that, but that's what people tended to remember. Oh, sorry about that noise. Okay, so they also tended to borrow more heavily from previous knowledge, just like this relates to Lisa with the balloon, right? And they did this more and more from previous knowledge as time passed before the additional recall. So if it had been a longer time from recall to recall, they'd be more likely to do this. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and I'm probably going to have to cut some stuff down to make this fit online, but let me know how you're doing with everything. Thanks, and have a good week. Bye.